This is the PTI Consulting Podcast, hosted by Michelle Owen.
Hello and welcome along to the latest PTI Podcast with myself, Michelle Owen. We've got Nathan Bethell with us, who's the Marketing Director. Hi, Nathan.
Hey, Michelle.
Kirby, who's Finance and Operations Director.
Hi, Michelle.
Mike Bohndiek, the Managing Director.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Mike. And Eric Solem, last but not least, Head of Business Applications and Commercial.
Hello.
Hello all. So today we're talking about understanding technology and ROI. Want to pick your brains all about this. I know Mike and Eric will probably have some areas of expertise, and Corey and Nathan will bring you in as well. So let's just start then with sort of understanding technology and ROI. How do you build a business case for technology investment when you see these businesses, and what are the factors involved in looking for ROI on your investment?
Yeah, I guess the first piece in terms of defining that as return on investment is, what does the R stand for? What are you actually looking to get out of it? If you think classically, you might just say money in, money out. I'm going to invest 50k, and over the first year it's going to break even. In the year two, it's going to make me £50,000. It's an easy CFO-led decision for the bottom line. But what are the intangibles around product? What are the pieces around customer experience? And more broadly, I think where most people are wrestling in this space at the moment is, how do we blend expectations of customers into return on investment? The wider world has seemingly a lot more budget than sports clubs in the majority of cases. We were discussing on a previous discussion that sports clubs are generally high-profile SMEs, and the commercial side of the business might have 50, maybe 150, 200 odd staff. Once you drop below sort of the top six of the Premier League. So you've got a small team, you've got a lean commercial budget. When you're playing, matters is what's actually driving the business overall. It's that sell-on clause that generates a couple of million quid, or it's the academy player you brought through who goes on to play for a championship club that generates you your true meanings. So every penny really counts when you're in the commercial side of the business. But then you end up with a fan who's coming in who's used to having a premium entertainment experience. What they get perhaps at the cinema, or what they get at an attraction, or what they get when they go to an airport, when they go to a train station, the kind of check-in processes, the digital tickets, the pieces around things like that. People are just expecting that now as a default when they come to a stadium, but so many are so far behind the curve in terms of that innovation piece. When we surveyed the 94 attendees who came to the PTI Consulting Stadium Insight event last month, they were at 30%. That was the rating they gave themselves. So we're 30% of the way through our digital transformation journey. The fan expectation is probably at 80% already. And so you've got this dilemma then, where you need to invest money, but it's essentially being sunk if you're the CFO. And Corey, from your perspective, with a financial and accountancy background, I'd be interested to hear the thoughts of when someone's bringing you an ROI case that's based on customer experience rather than profit. How do you view that money? Is that money that is almost lost? Is it money that needs to be depreciated? How do you treat that?
Yeah, I think you need to know what you're measuring to begin with. So it's easy to, from an advisory background or a business perspective, you buy a machine, it'll generate this many units, we'll sell at X price. It'll take 3 years to pay back. That's a big decision to make from an investment perspective. But when you're talking about sports clubs and investment in technology, you actually need to blend it across the whole organisation. And you need to link it back to your overall business strategy. That's the most important thing that gets overlooked. Things get booked in silos rather than, how does this actually affect our business strategy? Does this help us implement what our vision is going forward over the next 3-5 years? And that's what you really should be working toward with these things.
And how is that strategy affected when you operate in an environment where there's relegation and promotion?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, what's the cost of not doing this as well? So that's what you need to weigh up, and you need to prioritise it in the best way you can with the information you have at hand. So, to be honest, a lot of our clients that I advised in a past career was looking at the opportunity cost of not doing it. If you don't do this, what is the impact? Because you don't know what's going to happen once you bring something in.
Well, I guess that's where we come back to the experience points. is that, okay, we are now as an industry competing far more regularly with other leisure activities. We are competing with esports and people wanting to be at home, but we're also competing with general leisure. We're competing for people's time, and time is a commodity that's very challenging to get hold of. And when we're saying to them, actually, can you please drive an hour to our stadium and drive an hour back, despite the game being broadcast live on Sky, we've got to be able to give them something that makes that 2-hour time investment worthwhile versus I can do that 2-hour time investment by going to the gym, or I can go and have lunch with a friend, or I can spend some time with the family and still consume the football. And I think Corey's right in saying that it's a lot easier to look at the disaster scenario rather than the positive scenario. So you say, well, actually, if we don't continue to evolve our technology in stadium, are our attendances going to drop? The answer to that is fundamentally yes. The question sitting beneath it is at what rate? And that's the question we get asked most often. So we agree with you. We understand the premise that people are going to stop coming to our stadium if the experience stays static whilst their wider world experience increasingly digitises and becomes more experiential. But is that a 3-year problem? Does that need to go in this strategy cycle? Or is that a footnote for the 2022 to 2025 cycle? Or is that a 10-year away problem because actually sport is still so compelling? And our answer to people in some ways is consider it in line with broadcast cycles, because they are the things that are now going to influence that digital and home consumption far more than anything else outside of the comfort and time factor. It's actually, I go to the stadium because I can't consume it somewhere else. If when you take that away, as is sort of widely predicted for the next set of broadcast cycles, and people being able to sort of opt in, opt out on a much lower price point and on multiple devices, what is it that you are going to do that's going to get them coming back? So it's almost you're behind the curve now, you're at risk of losing fans, the curve is sharpening and steepening. So with every year that goes past, you're falling further behind that curve and expectations are rising exponentially. So if you get to that point where broadcast deals do change and that digital disruption piece does happen, you're going to be looking at a real black hole at that stage. You're going to have to do a big hit and a big investment all in one go, but you're also going to have to convince fans that the experience they've had consistently over a long period of time is going to fundamentally change. And fans are by default suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to weigh up by the sounds of it. It's quite interesting to hear how businesses have literally got to weigh up what they do and what sort of is worth doing. Can you give us some examples of where we've seen clients create sort of the best way of doing this? ROI business cases that have got board approval and been successful?
Specific case, well, it came to mind when Mike was just speaking. He said, keep them coming back. If I put my managing 6 season ticket campaigns with AS Roma hat on and looking at who's buying and who's coming back and talking to the Premiership rugby clubs that we work with and are talking to, knowing your demographic, it starts to get scary when you think out about 10 years. Because that 16-year-old kid who might come occasionally with his father or his uncle to the match, I need him to be my season ticket holder in the future. And his expectation of experience is based around technology. And so from that side of the business, from the box office side of the business, I need other people in the business to understand that experiential piece within the stadium, we need to start focusing on what does that look like in 5 years to make it attractive for those people to spend their money with us, club, rather than on other leisure activities. So, Ben Wells from Bath was talking about this at our conference. The expectation of ROI needs to change in the boardroom. So as Corey was saying, you buy a box, it costs this much. You know the functionality of that box is going to produce something in 18, 24 months' time, which will pay for itself, is typically how people think of these things. But it's the wider ROI and what does it mean for us to have an engaging fan experience within the building where we have to have some initial costs now, but they'll develop over time in a return for us.
What's interesting for me, I've seen the most successful ones in recent years that don't have a financial ROI. It's generally around media. People are understanding that sports clubs are media owners. We are rights holders in our own being. So if you look at the size of sort of social media teams, videographers, graphic designers, in sports clubs over the last 4 or 5 years, their TV studios, etc. They are flying up, and the level of the investment into that is huge. And what benefit do people get? Well, they understand that content brings people back. But there's no tangible. You can't really point to that and say, well, actually, we put in, our goal gifts on a Saturday are a little bit stronger, or our general imaging for our tweets is going to be better. We're going to win more fans, or have a better sponsorship experience, or be able to link it so tangibly. It's actually just a brand play that says, what do we want to stand for? Well, actually, sure, we've got a paywall and great video content sits behind it, but we give some away, or we have freemiums who just registered and don't have to pay for it, but you get it behind just a freemium wall or whatever it might be. People are very understanding, very accepting of how digital media has changed the landscape and what clubs do. You see clubs competing with each other on Twitter. You see people being pulled out as great examples. You see that one magic GIF or moment that people put in out getting 100,000 views, and you can link that to, well, great, my database might have grown, or some people might have registered, or might get another ticket sale because someone's feeling a little bit emotive at this moment in time. We can't put that into numbers. And what we need to do is almost link those kind of outcomes back to technology. So when you're talking about Wi-Fi is always the classic one, connectivity comes up all the time. Should I put Wi-Fi in my bowl? Does it kill the fan experience because no one's, well, definitely not standing, I shouldn't say that. People are sitting and screaming and shouting and supporting the team versus being able to look down at their phone. Is there an ROI on Wi-Fi? Do the fans really care about it? So yes or no. Well, actually, it's about brands. But what do you want to stand for as a club? What kind of an experience do you want people to have? In the same way that hiring 5 videographers and a couple of graphic designers changes your brand and augments people's sort of version of you.
Yeah, I think with digital technologies, especially with Instagram, the investment that clubs have made into their channels will start to pay back because of the way that Instagram are changing their model to be able to buy directly through Instagram now. So the opportunities there for clubs to actually start to get a return directly from their investment in that type of content production will be seen pretty much directly over the next year or so. So that's going to be really interesting for clubs.
Well, just on that, I've got a 4-year-old daughter who's been brainwashed into the life of an Arsenal fan.
Very good.
Poor girl. She already knows who they are, and she'll jump on my phone and she knows the app, and straight away she knows how to get to the store and pick out the kit that she wants to get. So she's a 4-year-old and would do that. So when she's 16, 18, 20, what's it going to look like? They've captured a fan already at 4, but how do they keep her engaged? They use technology. We'll relocate back to Australia at some point. How do they keep her engaged? How do they keep her being a fan of the club, being half a world away?
Yeah.
I think it's really important to consider these things.
And you got to dare to think differently sometimes. I mean, we had a paid TV channel. Clubs are media rights holders, like Mike was saying, and they produce all this content. Massive fans want to know what happened on the training ground each day, who's injured, what's going on. And clubs are the only ones really that have access to this. And we had a pay TV channel, and we could never get the numbers to move. Most big clubs have a pay TV channel on cable networks. We put it free to air, took a chance, and the numbers were 6 times. Became a big channel, watched all across, started to get some real information back about demographics, and then had an advertising play. So that was a return on taking a hit.
Yeah, the funny one I was talking to Corey about the other day was about train Wi-Fi. And sort of where people get to with that. So we had 2 different perspectives. My perspective was, on a particular train, it might cost me a couple of quid for a few hours, but then it actually works. I will consume that and I will happily pay for that. His view was, actually, I don't want to pay for train Wi-Fi because it's so unreliable. And I don't get to guarantee the experience until I've paid. I don't get this is definitely going to work, so you should definitely buy it. I get to buy it and then you at least get half a chance it might work. Type of mentality, but that's just an interesting blend between how 2 different train companies and operators consider it. So we're going to put the Wi-Fi on the trains, but we're going to charge the consumers to use it, and that's how we're going to get our ROI. Versus actually going to get that train, go with that train company over this one because I know the Wi-Fi is free, and that means I can work on the way into London or wherever it is that you're heading. As a result of that, I guess that kind of echoes a little bit of your experience. We built a digital platform and tried to charge people for it, but actually people weren't so sure what they were going to get in return for it, so they left it. But when you put the same content out for free, everyone wants it and everyone consumes it.
And that's a tough decision for a CFO to make as well. Like, there is no tangible return on that you can directly link to that investment.
Yeah.
But the benefit for the club or the organisation is so wide-ranging. How do you measure that? That's the discussion that needs to be had.
It's the whole wider technology piece, not being siloed across the business. And it's really interesting to see sort of visionary owners or CEOs of the club. I mean, I think of what Spurs did with their new stadium and their investment there and how they saw into the future and spent more money than it was probably needed to get an operational, really great building. But, the focal point on that actually being a place that's invested in being future ready is quite interesting. And because clubs are essentially media rights holders, a lot of visionary owners and CEOs are following that path. Free to air television, get the brand out, make sure there's a stadium that attracts people for the future.
Coming back to that point about needing to take it away from silos, to take kind of an abstract around ticketing as a sort of a practical example. Generally, your ticketing system business case is sitting with your head of ticketing, and that's their fundamental role. And what the CFO will want to know is whether we're going to A, sell more tickets, or B, reduce our costs. Are we revenue sharing? Are we taking costs down? Is the transaction fee disappearing? What are we getting? Why am I investing the upfront capital into this ticketing platform? When does it pay me it back? And if you take that siloed view, you may miss something relatively fundamental, like, well, actually, we're buying this new ticketing system. One of the things it will help us do is gather data. So we've spoken on data on several occasions, but if you think of the classic challenge, if I buy 4 tickets for the 4 of us in the room, you know me as the lead booker and you don't know the other 3. What price is the value of a customer record to then be able to directly market to people and within constraints of GDPR and the likes? But what is the value of increasing the database size through a new ticketing platform, which then may also influence the total database size that a commercial team can go and sell from a sponsorship point of view? So actually, we're going to invest 80k in a new ticketing system, but it should pay itself back in sponsorship activation via the data acquisition we're going to make through it inside the first year, because our database is going to go from 500,000 to 1 million. We can double the size of that piece. There's not a direct correlation between that and the sponsorship value, but it certainly helps. But if you think of it purely as a head of ticketing having the conversation one-on-one with the CFO, it's like, does this stack up, yes or no, from a ticketing pure point of view? And then you go into things like connectivity. At the other end of ticketing, everyone wants to go into that digital ticketing model to collect that data, to get that benefit for commercial, to be able to understand who's coming in, when they're coming in, what the fan behavioural delivery is, and who comes in when, and start to profile people and get more beers sold on a match day sort of thing. It can't happen without connectivity, and that's not just the connectivity at the turnstile, that's the connectivity for the fan, because a digital ticket on a phone, when you're not able to actually access it or download it, becomes a huge challenge. And the challenges of cellular data in high density environments at the moment is one that's common and well known. So what's the investment case for a stadium Wi-Fi delivery? Well, how often does it get thought about that we could then invest into digital ticketing, which might link to a digital ticketing system decision, which might link to a higher commercial yield from sponsorship? And that's where we're talking about cutting across multiple departments and multiple pieces, rather than the tech guy saying, you should just get Wi-Fi, and the ticketing person saying, hey, we should just renew with this system. It's what the hell are we trying to achieve collectively as a club, back to those business objectives, and how can this impact multiple areas of the business? So what filters can you put in place? So if we install Wi-Fi here, would that help retail operations? Almost undoubtedly. Suddenly your pop-up store in a corporate lounge is really easy to do. Suddenly your click and collect and your scanning capability around the ground improves. So you're no longer physically routed to the one stadium store that is A, in one physical location on one side of the ground, and B, heavily busy on a match day. So how do we capture that extra retail spend? Can we do some of that with the Wi-Fi? Yeah, of course we can. Can it help ticketing? Yeah, of course it can. It can go digital. Will it help with sponsor activations? Yeah, of course it will. Because sponsor activations are now turning up with iPads and just waiting to be able to show people or capture data or do something or install a screen. Of course it will help in these areas. But if we just go in and say, we just want fans to be able to share our story on Instagram, of course it doesn't stack up. Yeah. And you understand, therefore, the challenge of the CFO, where you say, well, you're presenting me a case, I kind of emotively feel that we should invest into this, but I collectively, logically think this isn't going to stack up for me.
And you can do it, because if you start from thinking about lifetime value, and what is the value of a new account in your database, then you can start to base those technology investment decisions on knowing the outcomes, not just this box costs this much, how am I going to get the ROI on it in 12 to 18 months? It's the whole longer picture.
And it's been very clear on what assumptions and modelling you're using to make that decision, and using the best information possible to make that decision. And if the data changes, being able to adapt. So nothing is set in stone. It's being able to adapt and make more informed decisions the further you get down the line. So I think the biggest thing is just linking it back to what are we trying to achieve the next 3 to 5 years? Does this fit in? And how are we going to fund it? Essentially, they're the questions you're asking.
Yeah. And total cost of ownership is a huge point. We spend an inordinate amount of time talking to clients about this, particularly when they're in new builds, particularly when people are looking for new developments, be it a new stand, be it a new stadia, be it a new concert venue, etc. Because you classically get to your value engineering stage, where you've got a whole list of wants and they come into, let's say, 100 million, and then the quantum surveyor comes in and says, oh, actually, hang on, you've only got £80 million in the budget, and suddenly you've got to cut 20% of what you had in the building. And the three things that get cut most often at that stage is restaurant space, storage space, and comm space for technology, because they're deemed almost to be the three non-revenue generating areas of the business. So everyone looks at that and says, well, hey, we're not cutting down the retail store. That's going to make us £500,000 a year. We get that. That's easy. We're not touching the retail store. We're not touching the hospitality lounges. We can sell all these covers. We go, well, actually, hang on, just take one step back.
How are you going to operate it?
How are you going to operate that when you haven't got any technology? So you say, well, actually, we've got no space to do the technology anymore. So the retail store can't do the smart mirrors. It can't target people. We can't look at cameras that will give us propensity to buy analysis and help us address our queues. You've got a hospitality lounge now that's potentially capable of hosting 900 people. We can only feed 400 of them because you're taking the kitchens out. So you've thought about things in these sorts of ways where you clearly understand what hospitality place does, because you understand the value of the cover, but not the value of the operation that sits behind it. So actually you've got to invest that space into it being a comms room, and maybe not an executive box or like kitchen space, and that not being an extra 10 seats in the lounge, so that you can keep the quality of the experience high enough that you keep people coming back. And that way you can increment your pricing over time, and that you can guarantee, back to Corey's point, the model that you're actually presenting is actually going to work, other than people coming back in and going, oh, it's all right, that new place. It's not great, though. Waited ages for my food. That is not the first impression you want people to have. And sometimes you have to invest into that up front to make sure that doesn't happen. Fantastic.
Guys, I think you've covered pretty much everything there. Return on investment of what we've been talking about, ROI, and more details. If anyone's listening and wants sort of more details and more guidance, what can they do?
Give us a call. Is the easy answer. There's quite a lot of blogs and topics related to this across the PTI Consulting website at pticonsulting.co.uk. But there's contact details right there if you're struggling with a particular type of technology or getting a large-scale business case across the line, then we're happy to chat. Fantastic. Well, you certainly know what you're talking about, guys. Thank you so much again, and join us again for the latest PTI podcast.
Thanks for listening to the PTI Consulting Podcast. Find out more about us at pticonsulting.co.uk.